الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على من بعث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We continue with our tafsir sessions on surah Al-Baqarah. We covered most of verse number 83. I'll just finish off the last part of verse 83 2 weeks ago. Last week was a break. So I'll just finish off the last parts of verse 83 and then go on to verse number 84, inshaAllah. So we covered up to about doing ihsan to parents and to those who are close and the orphans and the poor, etc. We'll start off with وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here that this is, remember, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ. Remember, this is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to Bani Israel in Medina. And He's reminding them that when we took a mithaq, a strong oath, promise from you, a strong contract with Bani Israel, your ancestors, to do a number of things, and we went through them. One of those things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions after worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after showing ihsan to the parents, one of those things is وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. This is very important. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention here وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا? He said, say and speak good words to all the people. With the parents, He said, show them ihsan. Right? Show them ihsan in your behavior, in your speech, in your emotions, in your feelings towards your parents. Show them ihsan, show them excellent behavior and character. But when it came to the rest of the people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, say to them good words, beautiful words, kind words. So here is just speech. With the parents, it was everything. Ihsan in action, in speech, and everything. One of the reasons is why the Mufassirin say that the minimum that you can do with other people that are not your family, not your close relatives, your parents, is that you can at least the minimum, whether they are your enemies or your friends, whether you know them or you don't know them, for everyone, linnas, all of the rest of the people, you can at least show them or speak to them a kind word. In your speech, at least be good to them. Show them kindness in your speech. There's another amazing reason and effect behind this order. Imagine, because the Mufassirin, they said that the way we think of someone, the way we believe a person is, if we don't know them, if we think he's a cheat, he's a thief, he's an oppressor, he is bad, he is a criminal, he's my enemy, or whatever. If we think negative, if we believe this person is a bad person, if we believe this person is an enemy, our speech will reflect that. The way we talk with him, the way we say something to him, it will reflect that. You will speak in a different tone. You will say certain things to that person. Why? Because of your belief inside your heart, your understanding, your knowledge that this person is a bad person, or this person has harmed me, or this person is an enemy of mine. So your knowledge of that person, your belief about this person will reflect on your tongue. As they say, the lisan is the tarjaman al-qalb. The tongue is the translator of the heart. The tongue only speaks what is in the heart. The tongue articulates what is in the heart most of the time. Obviously, some people may say something, believe something else. But generally, the way you speak to a person will be determined, will be based on actually what you think of that person. If you don't like that person, it will reflect in the way you speak to them. If you love someone, if you think they're very good and pious, or they're your close family member, or your close friend, your speech will reflect that. The way you speak to them, softly, nicely, with kind words, not upsetting them, not hurting them, your speech will reflect that. So to transform this relationship amongst society, amongst communities, amongst the greater number of people, even if there's enmity, even if they're from a different faith, even if they're your enemies, the command is here, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. Why? So that when you approach other people, if you're commanded to speak kindly to them, slowly that will change your perception of them. Slowly that will change your perception of them. You will actually start dealing with them in a good manner, in a good way, in a nice way. Because Islam commands us to, and before Islam, the previous Sharia, as it can be very obviously seen here, commands us to deal with other people with kindness and goodness. Doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't mean you accept their oppression. It doesn't mean you accept their bad deeds. It doesn't mean you agree with their criminality. It doesn't mean you agree with what they are, who they represent. But when you speak to them, a believer's characteristic reflects. A believer's speech is always kind, is always good, is always beautiful to the rest of the people. And if everyone practices this, this will reduce enmity, animosity. This will reduce quarrels. This will reduce fitna in the community if everyone practices this. So when you speak to somebody nicely in a nice tone, even if that person doesn't like you, automatically he will change his attitude, his tone, his approach to you. So this is an amazing command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just through practicing this, you can transform the relations amongst communities, amongst relatives, amongst friends, amongst people you know. Everything can be changed just through the speech. And it's also the minimum that is it's easy to do. If you can't gift someone anything, someone you don't like, you're not going to sacrifice your money for them. Someone you don't like, you're not going to go out your way and do things for them. But someone you don't like, you don't know, it's easy to at least be kind to them or not to be rude to them. So again, it's a small level of burden. It's the minimum everyone should do, but it has a massive impact. It has a transformative impact. It can change the relationships within communities. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that none of you believes until لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. Again, this hadith is a very famous hadith, and most people think, this here, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه, his brother. A lot of people think this is his brother is only Muslim and Muslim. No, Imam Nawawi says this applies to everybody. Imam Nawawi, who collected this hadith in his 40 collection, he explains that this is for everybody, Muslim and non-Muslim. It's not just for Muslims. So look at this, the faith, iman, submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say we're Muslim, which means what? Muslim means the one who has submitted, the one who has surrendered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're constantly saying this. We constantly identify ourselves as Muslim, but do our actions reflect this? Here, the Prophet ﷺ said that here, in brackets we add, and not we, but the people, the scholars who explain the hadith, in brackets they add, because if you read the hadith straight, none of you has faith until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. This is the direct, literal wording of the hadith. It means you have no faith. If you don't love for your brother what you love for yourself, you have no faith. This is the literal meaning. But in brackets, the scholars put, none of you have complete faith. Complete in brackets. Or none of you have perfected in brackets your faith. Because obviously if you don't love for your brother what you love for yourself, you don't become a kafir. Because it's not literal. It means like you really don't have the true faith. You've missed the real essence of faith. You don't have a complete faith. Your faith is not strong. Your faith is still imperfect. Your faith is still weak if you do not love for your brother what you love for yourself. So part of that loving for your brother, loving for your brother what you love for yourself, is you would love for everyone to speak to you with good words, isn't it? Isn't it the case you would love for everyone to speak with you in good terms, good words, politely, kindly? Everyone was. Who likes people to be rude to them? Nobody. If that is the case, that I personally, I hate it if somebody is rude to me, whether it's my friends or family or people I don't know or my colleagues at work or colleagues at university or college. Most people hate it if somebody is rude to them. Therefore, according to this hadith, I should also hate being rude to somebody else, because I love this, that people be kind to me, polite to me. I should also love that I also be kind and polite and use good words to them. And the scholars explain, what does this mean here? وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. What does it mean, say good things to people? The scholars explain it means many things. It includes commanding the good and forbidding the evil. This is also part of saying good to people. Saying husna, commanding good things, encouraging people to do good things, to give in charity, to pray salah, to fast in Ramadan, anything to do with good deeds in Islam. When you speak and encourage people in a nice way to do this, this is part of وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. This husna, this good, this beautiful say, this is part of it. They also said it includes every good type of behavior that Allah is pleased with. So whatever you tell people to do in terms of behavior, that is also included in this verse. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith narrated by Imam Ahmad, he said that لا تحقرن من المعروف شيئا وإن لم تجد فلق أخاك بوجه منطلق. That do not belittle any righteous deeds, meaning don't look down on any good deeds. Don't think that a small deed of goodness is something small. It's not worth much. It's not like Hajj, or it's not like Ramadan. It's not like memorizing the Qur'an. It's not like reading Salah. Don't think even a small good deed, don't think it's something small. Don't belittle it. Even if you don't find anything good, right? At least meet your brother with a pleasant face, with a smiling face. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, a smile of the believer to his brother, another believer, is charity. When you smile, even smiling. So even if you can't find anything good for your brother or any good deeds to do in that moment, you may think approaching my brother with a smile is neither here or there. You may think it's such a small deed, is it worth doing? What kind of reward is going to be there? You won't even think about it. But the Prophet ﷺ is already told us in another hadith, is charity. It's like you're spending fi sabilillah. And here he's saying, don't belittle any deed, even if you have nothing, at least meet him with a smile, a good face. This is something big on the scales of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that one of you will, in the meaning of the hadith, that one of you will come on day of Qiyamah, on the day of judgment, at the judgment time, and you will see a mountain full of your good deeds. A mountain full of your good deeds. And you will ask, where did this come from? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inform you that it's one good deed you did, and He multiplied it by many, many times. The Prophet ﷺ said, save yourself from the hellfire, even with half a date. Half, not even a full date. He said, even if you can give fi sabilillah half a date, probably not worth 1 pence or 2 pence today's worth. So every small deed is huge in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not belittle any good deed. So this قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا means speak to everyone with good words, kind words. Do not belittle it. This is very important. And whatever small good thing you can do for them, do it. At least minimum, meet people with a pleasant face, with a pleasant attitude. And Ibn Abbas said, Al-ma'na qulu lahum la ilaha illallah wa muruhum biha. Ibn Abbas said that qulu linnasi husna means to say to people, invite them to Islam, to Tawheed. So da'wah, giving da'wah to people, this is also included. And all of this is emphasizing good character. The Prophet ﷺ said that I have not been sent except to perfect good moral character. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. That indeed you are on a high moral standard, a high moral character. You have an amazing character. This was how the Prophet ﷺ is described. So his da'wah is not just calling people to Islam by words. His da'wah was also through his character. The main purpose of Islam is to reform people in terms of their behavior and character. So all of this is pointing towards that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Musa alayhi salam and Harun, both of them, when he commanded them to go to Fir'aun, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. The best people, as I mentioned previous week, the best people on the face of this earth at the time, Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhim as-salam, go to the worst person, the worst oppressive tyrant of the time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands them, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Say to him a soft word. Say to him a soft word, a gentle word. Speak to him gently. He's an oppressor, he's a tyrant. He's been punishing Bani Israel. He thinks he's God, he equates himself to God. He's committed the biggest crime against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Say to him a soft word. And this is something we Muslims really have lost. This is something we have lost. And as they said, فَالْقَائِلْ لَيْسَ بِأَفْضَلْ مِنْ مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ وَالْفَاجِرْ لَيْسَ بِأَخْبَثْ مِنْ فِرْعَوْنَ. Said there's no speaker who is better than Musa alayhi salam and Harun, and there's no oppressor or evil transgressor worse than Fir'aun. And even there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded them to say a gentle word, speak to them softly, kindly. Why? Because ultimately the da'wah to invite people to Islam or just to build relations is not to do with argumentation and debating and putting somebody down with hateful words. This will never win hearts. Ultimately, his heart is the believer's heart. What's in there? The character, the beauty of the person's behavior that will impact on the other person. And that we are commanded to do. So this is very, very important. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues. He says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, and establish prayer and pay the zakah. So these are all part of the promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made with Bani Israel in the past. So he's mentioning them one by one to establish the prayer, pay the zakah. Then he says, ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِّنْكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. But then the way Allah is speaking here to Bani Israel in Medina, he's saying as though then you turned away, you lot turned away except for a few of amongst you. And you were avoiding it, you were turning away from it, you were kind of going away from that command or fulfilling that command. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Bani Israel in Medina as though it was them. It wasn't them, it was their ancestors. But why did he say that ثُمَّ تَوَلَّيْتُمْ, you turned away? Because these people at the time were also rejecting the truth. They were not accepting the messenger the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were also turning away. They were also not accepting the truth of the Qur'an. So it's as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is connecting them to their ancestors. Just as they turned away, just as they heard the truth, they turned away from the truth. You people are also doing that. So it's as though He's addressing them as well. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in a long next two verses, and remember when we took your covenant, again, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَكُمْ, again another promise, another covenant. لا تسفكون دماءكم ولا تخرجون أنفسكم من دياركم, that shed not the blood of your people, nor turn out your own people from their dwellings. ثم أقررتم وأنتم تشهدون, then this you ratified, and to this you bore witness. After this, ثم أنتم هؤلاء تقتلون أنفسكم, after this it is you who kill one another. وتخرجون فريقا منكم من ديارهم, and you drive out a party of you from their homes. تظاهرون عليهم بالإثم والعدوان, and assist their enemies against them in sin and transgression. And if they came to you as captives, you ransom them, although their expulsion was forbidden to you. So this part, this verse 84 and part of 85, is describing a situation. In Medina, you had two tribes amongst the non-Muslims, amongst the Arabs, the Aus and the Khazraj. These two tribes were always fighting against each other. They had a long history of being enemies to one another. These two major tribes in Medina. You had three other tribes that were from Bani Israel. Three tribes from Bani Israel. What used to happen, these three tribes from Bani Israel, they would have allegiances with one of the two tribes. So one of the Bani Israel would be with one tribe, another tribe from Bani Israel would be with the other, and the third one will be with one of them. So they had allegiance with the non-Jews in Medina. So because of the allegiance, when the fight used to happen between these two tribes, Aus and Khazraj, the non-Jews, Arabs, tribes of Medina, when they used to fight, because the allegiance was given by the tribes of Bani Israel there in Medina, different tribes, they ended up fighting on the side of whoever they gave their allegiance to, which meant the Jews, the Bani Israel of the time in Medina, they would be fighting against their own brothers in faith on the other side, because they split up and they held allegiances with opposing sides. And this is what this verse is referring to. That, in the Torah, it's haram for you to fight your brother in faith. Bani Israel, it was haram for them to fight each other. They were not allowed to fight each other. They were not allowed to drive each other from their homes. They were not allowed to shed the blood of each other. And they were definitely not allowed to assist people of outside of their faith, people who were their enemies, against each other. So they did all of this, although this was not allowed. But then what did they used to do? And if they come to you as captives, you ransom them, although their expulsion was forbidden to you. Meaning, when the two parties would fight and the war is finished, each party has captives. They hold prisoners of war. So sometimes a Jewish tribe would have as a prisoner of war one of their fellow Jewish community people. So they were holding their brothers in faith, prisoners of war. And then they would demand the money and release them, even though this was haram for them. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out. But then after pointing this out, this contradiction, and then breaking their laws, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. He asks this question, do you believe in a part of the book and you reject, you do kufr with another part, meaning all of this was haram to you in the Torah. All of this was haram. Fighting, driving your own brothers out of your home, assisting non-Jews against the Jews. All of this was haram. Taking as prisoners of war and then ransoming them. All of this was haram. But the first four you did, and the last one, when it came to ransom, you're following the Torah, how to do ransom and pay money and release war captives. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, do you believe in a part of the book and you reject another part? This is addressed to them, of course, but the lesson is for us as well. The lesson is for us. The Qur'an is a complete book, and all of the books that came in previous shariahs with previous messengers. It is a complete book. We cannot pick and choose. And this is, again, one of the weaknesses of the Muslim community today. One of the weaknesses of the Muslims in general, that we pick and choose different things from the book. There are many Muslims who will not cover their bodies with the minimum amount that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded. But then when it comes to salah, they will cover. Whether it's men or women, I'm not picking on any particular gender here, but this is a fact. There are people who don't cover their aura, but when it comes to salah, they will cover. Or there are people who don't pray the whole year, and when it comes to Ramadan, they pray. Or there are people who pray only on Friday, they don't pray the rest of the week. Or there's people who pray one salah a day and they miss the others. And so forth. We all know people like that. So in effect, what they're doing is no different to what these people were doing at the time. Because you're picking and choosing parts of the book. The same book, the same command, the amr, the same command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which commands you to pray, which commands you to cover, which commands you to fast, which commands you to pay zakah, which commands you to go hajj. It's all the same, it's coming from the same source. You can't pick and choose. You can't say, then if you do that, this ayah will apply. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ. So therefore, do you believe in only part? Because all Muslims, if you ask them, do you believe in the Qur'an? Nobody will say, I don't believe in the Qur'an. Nobody. They'll get angry. If you say, do you believe this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do you believe this is the Qur'an from front page to the back? Yes, of course, without a hesitation. But the Qur'an, what does it mean to believe in the Qur'an? Does it mean to just respect the book, the pages? Or does it mean to follow its guidance? The main reason the Qur'an comes is because to give us guidance which people act upon. Give us guidance which people follow. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rebuking Bani Israel. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ. No, they actually believe in the whole book. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is questioning their faith in the book when they don't act in a part of it. So therefore, you can only say, I believe this is the Qur'an, when you actually act according to the Qur'an. If you only act according to some verses. I'm not talking about people who struggle. Everyone tries. People will fall in sin. People will act against some verses. This is not intentionally. They're trying, they're struggling, they're weak, they slipped, they made a mistake, make tawbah. That's different. I'm talking about people from the Muslim community who live their lives picking and choosing, not accidentally. Sometimes it's lack of knowledge, lack of Islamic literacy. Sometimes it's the way they've been brought up. Sometimes it's culture. But it's happening. It's happening across our communities. If we do that, if we claim that we believe in the Qur'an and our actions don't reflect it, then that question can be asked as well. Do you believe in a part of the book and you reject a part? If you told somebody that you do kufr with Surah Baqarah, you do kufr. When it comes to Surah Baqarah, you're kafir. When it comes to Surah An-Nas, you're mu'min. No one will accept this. They'll get angry. They'll fight you. What are you talking about? I believe in all of it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is relating the practice of Bani Israel. Because they didn't practice the commands in the book, Allah questions their faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala questions their belief in the book because of the practice. So it's not just about what's in the heart. It's not about belief. It's about practice. It's about following, implementation. So this is, we have to really look at this, all of us. And it's not easy. It's not easy to follow everything in the book. It's not easy. And most people will not be able to manage that. But the main thing is to have the intention, is to try, is to accept it, is to struggle. And this is what life is about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us to test us. There's lots of commandments in the book. There's lots of commandments in the sunnah. Nobody can do everything. The Prophet said, whatever I give you, try your best to do. Whatever I give you, try your best to do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, fear Allah mastata'atum, as much as you can. You try your best, your effort, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see that. But to not try, not to acknowledge, to live a life where we follow some parts of the Qur'an and we reject and we go completely against other parts, this is grievous indeed in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says straight away. فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ. What is the reward of the one who does that amongst you? What is the recompense of those who do this amongst you? إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Number one, except a disgraceful life in this world. خِزْيٌ, you'll be disgraced, humiliated in this life, not in the Yawm al-Qiyamah. Then وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. And on the day of resurrection, they will be consigned, flung to the most grievous torment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. So two major threats, consequences of believing in a part or acting by a part of the book and rejecting another part. Or acting by one part of the book and not acting by the other part. As you know, the famous saying, everybody says Islam is a complete code of life. Yes, Islam tells you how to behave in your salah, as it tells you how to behave in the bathroom, as it tells you how to behave in your house, as it tells you how to behave in your business. Islam has guidance, communication, commandments from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all aspects of our lives. But it's also left many areas as mubah, free for us to choose how we want to do things. So what is the consequence when somebody chooses not to follow a part and follow another part? Well, here at least he's addressing Bani Israel. Look at the consequences. Number one, in this dunya, you will have a life of disgrace and humility. And this is so true with the Muslims. You can see throughout history why today Muslims are weak, why today Muslims are humiliated, why today Muslims are divided, why today Muslims have lost economic power, political power, all types of power. Why are they trampled on across the globe? The answer is so easy and clear to see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us here, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْدِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْدِ. Do you believe in a part of the book and you do kufr with the rest of it? Then what will be the recompense? A life of humiliation and disgrace in this dunya. And this is what we are facing. Because the vast majority of us, we have turned away from the Qur'an as the guide in our lives. We have turned away from the Qur'an as our source of reference, as our guide for our lives. We have turned away. It's very easy to see. So if we want to revive the ummah, if we want to get back to some sense of dignity, opposite of humiliation is to have dignity, is to be respected, is to have unity, is to have some authority. If we want this back, then we have to return to the Qur'an. We have to return to the guidance of the Qur'an. We have to return to acting by the Qur'an. And then the worst consequence after that is the ashad al-adhab, yawm al-qiyamah. People will be punished for not following the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the definition of a wajib or a fard, that if you do it, you get rewarded, and if you don't do it, you get punished. This is the definition of what is a wajib or a fard. What is obligatory? Definition is it's something that Allah commands you to do, and you have to do it. If you do it, you get rewarded. If you don't, you get punished. Of course, unless somebody makes tawbah and reforms himself or herself. So if we look at our problems across the world, across our communities, it comes down to this. We are not following the guidance of Islam. We're not following the guidance of Qur'an. We're not following the guidance of Sunnah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to implement the guidance to the best of our abilities. Like I said, it's not easy. It's not something, somebody can do in one day. It's a lifelong struggle. But the main important thing is to understand it. What are the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an? If I never pick up the Qur'an, if I don't read a translation, if I don't go to a study circle, if I don't read and study with teachers, how will I ever know what's in the Qur'an? So the first thing is to have the intention to find out, to learn, and then have the intention to struggle, implement, follow the guidance. And the human nature, as one of my teachers said, human nature is built in such a way, right, that it loves the pleasurable things. It loves enjoyment, right? It loves to sleep, it loves to eat, it loves to drink, it loves to engage in haram things which give pleasure. This is very clear. We have been built in such a way. But that enjoyment and that pleasure is of a certain level. But also the human nafs has been created in another way. That if you struggle against your desires, if you struggle against your nafs, if you struggle against your shahwa, your base lower desires, and you struggle and do good deeds, you struggle when you wake up for fajr, you struggle and you go to salah in the masjid, you struggle and you pay charity, you struggle and you go to hajj, you struggle and you fast, you struggle and you speak the truth, you struggle and you're kind to others, you struggle and you sacrifice. Once your nafs goes over that struggle, you will find a pleasure, a satisfaction in those actions which you will not find in the other actions. And this is what the scholars used to say. If the kings knew what we had of the taste of being in ibadah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would come and invade us and take this from us. They would want to come and take it from us. All the pleasures of this dunya, it's easy to say. I'm not saying, I'm not saying this is my experience. I'm saying this is what the scholars are saying. And this is a reality. Even in a small thing, you can taste it. Sometimes in your salah, sometimes in your adhkar, sometimes in your dua, sometimes in Ramadan, in Taraweeh, in witr, qunut, or whatever, or tahajjud, you will feel a pleasure that nothing else in this dunya can provide. And that's why people who are in the ubudiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people who habituate themselves to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fight their nafs, to oppose their desires, they feel a pleasure and they stick to it. And you cannot beat them to leave that. You cannot beat them to commit a sin. You cannot beat them to break their fast. You cannot beat them to commit zina. Why? The pleasure is in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the problem with most people is they go for the immediate pleasure. They think that is the pleasure. They look at the ibadah and they think that is hardship. They think it is hardship. عَصَى أَن تُحِبُّ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. Perhaps you may love a thing and it is bad for you. It is bad for you. And the opposite, perhaps you may hate a thing, dislike a thing, and it is good for you. And this is the nature of Sharia, that in the apparent first step, it will look difficult. This is why the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, what did he say? He said, Jannah is surrounded by difficulties. The path to Jannah, paradise, is surrounded by difficulties. To get to Jannah, you have to overcome those difficulties. And Jahannam, hellfire, is surrounded by pleasures and delights. You go through those delights and pleasures, you end up in the hellfire. So this is the nature of the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever He has commanded us to do, initially it doesn't sit well with the nafs. Initially it looks something hard, it looks like something restrictive, but once you start doing it, once you win that battle with your nafs and you overcome your desires, you will feel a pleasure, a sweetness, a happiness, a satisfaction in the ibadah, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which you will not feel in the pleasures. Because most people, you ask them, the pleasures which are haram, initially it's nice, later on it's regret. Later on it's problematic. Later on it's harmful in every single way. And everybody knows this. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only telling us to do things which are beneficial for us. And I've said this many times here, the whole of Sharia is to achieve maslahah for humankind, fid darain, is to achieve that which is beneficial, that which is of your interest in the darain, in this dunya and in the akhirah. Everything Allah commanded us to do only benefits us in this dunya and in the akhirah. Everything Allah commanded us to stay away from, it harms us in this dunya and in the akhirah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finishes off this ayah by saying, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees everything we do. He sees, do we follow a part of the book and we reject another part? Every single action. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not heedless of whatever we do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watches, sees, observes everything we do. Everything is recorded. On the Day of Judgment, it will be opened in front of us. Nothing goes amiss. Nothing goes amiss. So that in itself should be a motivation to follow the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's watching us. He knows what we're doing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to follow the guidance of the Qur'an to the best of our ability. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to stay away from the prohibitions of the Qur'an, of the Sunnah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our path to Jannah easy, inshallah.